Forget the idea of Greek gods as wise, majestic beings. That's just good marketing. The truth is, Mount Olympus was a chaotic circus run by a family with infinite power and the impulse control of a toddler. They were petty, jealous, and made choices so baffling, it's a miracle anyone survived. Today, we're exposing the 44 most absurd, weird, and downright dumbest moments in Greek mythology. These are the stories your history teacher was too sensible to tell you. 1. Once upon an extremely awkward marriage, a king named Cinyras told his daughter Mira she was so beautiful, she must marry the most handsome man alive. Cue divine irony. She ends up cursed to fall in love with her own father. Under a veil of darkness and heavy emotional damage, she tricks him into sleeping with her. When he finds out, he does the classic Greek dad reaction. Attempts murder. She escapes, prays for help, and the gods, in a solution, turn her into a tree. While in tree form, she gives birth to Adonis, who literally drops out of the bark. That's right, Adonis, heartthrob of Olympus, was born from an incestuous tree situation. Would you believe it? 2. The Trojan War. A full decade of brutal fighting, cities burned, heroes turned into worm food. You'd assume the cause was some grand political dispute. You would be hilariously wrong. It all started because Eris, the goddess of discord and cosmic-level drama queen, didn't get an invitation to a wedding. As payback, she rolls a golden apple into the party that says, "For the fairest." Instantly, 3 of the most powerful goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, start a divine slap fight over it. Zeus, demonstrating peak leadership, punts the decision to a random mortal shepherd named Paris. After being offered the world's worst bribes, he chooses Aphrodite's offer of a hot girlfriend and single-handedly kickstarts a world war. It's the most catastrophic case of "she started it" in history. 3. Orpheus was the ultimate rock star of the ancient world. His music was so good, he could probably make the tax office give you a refund. So when his wife Eurydice tragically dies, he waltzes into the underworld and plays a concert so emotionally devastating that Hades himself, the grim CEO of Death Inc., agrees to let her go. The one condition is painfully simple. Walk out and don't look back until you're both in the sun. He leads her through the darkness, the finish line is in sight, he can feel the sun on his skin. But then his crippling anxiety kicks in with a classic, "What if?" He turns around. She's there, for one fleeting, horrifying second, before being yanked back into eternal darkness. He had one simple task, the easiest final boss ever, and he fumbled it at the goal line. 4. The Amazons, that legendary all-female warrior society, ran their nation less like a country and more like a brutally efficient, unsentimental corporation. Their approach to population growth was an annual procreation festival with a neighboring tribe of men. This wasn't a romantic getaway, it was a business trip. There were no follow-up calls. If a girl was born, she was fast-tracked into the Amazonian training program. If a boy was born, he was packed up and returned to sender, no refunds or exchanges. It was the most organized and large-scale ghosting in human history, a masterclass in keeping your society exclusive and terrifying. 5. Let's talk about Arachne. She was a mortal weaver so insanely talented that people started saying her work was better than Athena's. Now, most would take that as a compliment. Athena took it as a personal attack. So she disguised herself as an old lady, challenged Arachne to a weaving contest, and they both went to thread war. Arachne's tapestry was flawless, depicting all the gods' scandals in high-def stitchwork. Athena, furious that it was both perfect and factually accurate, destroyed it and cursed Arachne into becoming a spider. Basically, she lost a competition and rage-quit the species of the competitor. That's how pettiness invented arachnids. 6. The myth of Narcissus is a timeless lesson about being dangerously attractive. Narcissus was so good-looking that his main personality trait was rejecting people. As cosmic payback, a goddess curses him to fall in love with the first person he sees. He stumbles upon a clear pool, sees his own reflection, and is instantly smitten. We're talking head over heels, can't eat, can't sleep, obsessed with his own face. He refuses to leave the water's edge, whispering sweet nothings to himself until he withers away and dies. He is the only person in history to be fatally trapped in the friend zone by his own reflection. It's a level of self-love that circles right back around to self-destruction. 7. People hear Dionysus and picture chill vineyard parties. They're wrong. His inner circle of followers, the Maenads, were basically a roving death metal festival that took things way too literally. These women would get divinely intoxicated, run into the mountains, and enter a state of ecstatic madness that gave them terrifying super strength. Their signature act of worship was sparagmos, the ritual tearing apart of wild animals with their bare hands. And if an unlucky traveler happened to wander into their party, he would quickly go from being a spectator to being the main course. It's a stark reminder that in ancient Greece, party till you drop could have a very literal and very messy meaning. 8. Helen of Troy. The face that launched 1,000 ships. It's a poetic way of saying she was so beautiful that an entire civilization decided to implode over her. But her origin story is where the plot truly goes off the rails. Zeus, king of the gods and a being with zero self-control, sees the mortal Queen Leda and decides he must have her. His master plan of seduction? To turn into a giant swan. Not a handsome prince, not a wealthy king, a bird. And somehow, this works. The result wasn't a baby, it was eggs. Leda laid 2 eggs, and from one of them hatched Helen. The woman at the center of the greatest epic ever told was, quite literally, an egg person. Honestly, it explains a lot. 9. Once upon a myth, King Erysichthon got hungry. But not regular hungry. He wanted to cut down a sacred tree in Demeter's grove to build a banquet table. The tree begged him not to do it. Yes, the tree talked. He chopped it anyway. Demeter was furious and didn't just curse him with guilt. She cursed him with infinite hunger. No matter how much he ate, he was starving. He sold everything, including his house, his daughter, and probably his dignity just to afford snacks. Eventually, he had nothing left to consume. So he ate himself. Yes, he munched his own limbs like cursed chicken wings. All because he couldn't leave a holy tree alone. 10. Everyone knows Pegasus, the majestic flying horse. But his origin story is one of the most bizarre footnotes in mythology. He wasn't born in a magical meadow or created by a benevolent god. He sprang into existence from the neck of Medusa after she was defeated by the hero Perseus. So this beautiful, winged creature, a symbol of poetry and inspiration, was essentially a surprise party favor from a decapitation. Imagine that scene. A hero completes his quest, and suddenly a fully grown winged horse just erupts from the scene. It's less a majestic birth and more the weirdest special effect in ancient history. Pegasus wasn't born. He was an unexpected byproduct. 11. Theseus, the hero of Athens, gets tasked with taking out the Minotaur, a half-man, half-bull living in the labyrinth, a maze so complex it was basically ancient IKEA without the meatballs. Getting in was easy, getting out was impossible. But Theseus had a secret weapon. Ariadne, the king's daughter, who was crushing on him hard. She gave him the ultimate low-tech solution to a high-tech problem, a ball of string. He tied it to the entrance, unspooled it all the way to the center, dealt with the Minotaur, and then just rewound his way out. He beat a legendary architectural marvel, not with genius, but with the kind of simple trick you'd use to not get lost in the woods. 12. The god Pan, a charming half-goat dude, fell head over hooves for a nymph named Syrinx. She was completely uninterested and ran away from his awkward advances. He chased her to a riverbank, where she made a desperate prayer and was instantly transformed into a patch of reeds. Pan, arriving too late, was heartbroken. But then he heard the wind whistling through the reeds and had an idea. Instead of, moving on, he cut down the reeds that used to be his crush, fashioned them into a musical instrument, and started playing tunes on them. He basically turned his romantic rejection into an arts and crafts project and then serenaded himself with it. It's a bold, if creepy, way to handle heartbreak. 13. One of the most absurd events on Mount Olympus was the great divine bake-off between Apollo and Hermes. Shortly after he was born, the baby god Hermes got bored and decided to steal Apollo's entire herd of sacred cattle. To cover his tracks, he made the cows walk backward and even fashioned tiny shoes for them to confuse their footprints. When Apollo finally tracked him down, the infant Hermes was innocently lying in his crib. As a peace offering, Hermes presented Apollo with a new invention he'd just whipped up from a tortoiseshell and some guts: the lyre. Apollo was so enchanted by the beautiful instrument that he completely forgave the massive cattle theft. Hermes literally got out of a grand larceny charge by giving his victim a guitar. 14. King Midas is famous for his golden touch, but that wasn't his only moment of questionable judgment. After being cured, he was asked to judge a music competition between Apollo, the god of sublime music, and Pan, a goat man playing some pipes. For reasons that defy all logic and good taste, Midas declared Pan the winner. Apollo, who did not handle criticism well, was furious. He decided that if Midas had the musical taste of a donkey, he should have the ears to match, and promptly gave him a pair of fuzzy donkey ears. It's a story that proves two things. Never insult a god's artistic talent, and some people's opinions are so bad they have physical consequences. 15. When the goddess Thetis wanted to make her son Achilles invulnerable, she chose a rather slapdash method. She took baby Achilles and dipped him headfirst into the river Styx, whose magical waters offered protection from all harm. It was a quick and dirty approach to immortality, but she made one critical error. She held him by his heel. That one tiny spot, where her hand covered his skin, remained completely mortal and vulnerable. It's the mythological equivalent of painting a car, but missing a spot under the door handle. All that effort for a near-perfect job that would later have catastrophic, arrow-related consequences. 16. The story of the Golden Fleece, a treasure sought by Jason and the Argonauts, is epic. But the fleece itself is just weird. It's the hide of a magical, flying ram that was sent by the gods to rescue two children from their evil stepmother. The ram, named Chrysomalos, successfully flew one of them to safety, but the other fell off mid-flight into a sea that was then named after her. After its one and only mission, the ram was sacrificed, and its golden wool was hung on a tree, guarded by a dragon, to become the most sought-after prize in the world. So, the ultimate treasure in Greek mythology is basically the skin of a flying taxi that had a 50% passenger success rate. 17. Let's talk about the Chimera, a monster that sounds like it was designed by a committee on a very weird deadline. It wasn't just one scary creature. It was a biological mess. It had the head and body of a lion, a goat's head sticking out of its back for some reason, and a venomous snake for a tail. Oh, and it breathed fire. It was less a terrifying beast and more of a confused, multi-animal pileup. The hero Bellerophon was tasked with defeating this zoological disaster. His brilliant plan? He flew above it on the winged horse Pegasus and dropped a lead-tipped spear into its mouth. The Chimera's own fire breath melted the lead, which then trickled down its throat and cooked it from the inside out. He literally made the monster defeat itself with its own worst feature. 18. The story of the nymph. Daphne is a masterclass in divine awkwardness. The god Apollo, fresh off a victory, got arrogant and mocked Eros, the god of love, for playing with bows and arrows. As payback, Eros shot Apollo with a golden arrow, making him fall madly in love with the first person he saw, the nymph Daphne. He then shot Daphne with a lead arrow, making her utterly repulsed by Apollo. What followed was an uncomfortable, one-sided chase scene through the forest. Just as Apollo was about to catch her, Daphne prayed to her father, a river god, for help. Her dad's solution was to turn her into a laurel tree. Apollo, heartbroken but also incredibly weird, then declared the laurel his sacred tree and started wearing a wreath of its leaves on his head He basically turned his unrequited crush into a hat. 19. When Paris of Troy eloped with Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world, her husband Menelaus wasn't happy. He called upon all her former suitors, who had made a pact years earlier to defend her marriage. One of these suitors was Odysseus, king of Ithaca, who really didn't want to go to war. To get out of it, he pretended to have gone completely insane. When the Greek commanders arrived to recruit him, they found him plowing his fields with an ox and a donkey yoked together, sowing salt instead of seeds. To test if he was faking, one of the commanders placed Odysseus's infant son in the path of the plow. Odysseus swerved to avoid him, proving he was sane and immediately getting himself drafted into a 10-year war. His brilliant plan to avoid the war lasted about 5 minutes. 20. The god Asclepius became such a brilliant physician that he didn't just heal the sick. He figured out how to bring the dead back to life. This was a revolutionary breakthrough in medicine, but a catastrophic problem for the cosmic bureaucracy. Hades, the god of the underworld, saw his client list dwindling and filed a formal complaint with Zeus. He argued that Asclepius was disrupting the natural order and, more importantly, wrecking his business model. Zeus, seeing the logic in this, agreed that mortality rates needed to stay up. He promptly struck the world's greatest doctor down with a thunderbolt. Asclepius was so good at his job that the CEO of the universe had to personally fire him to keep the system running. 21. The hero Perseus had to get the head of Medusa, the snake-haired monster whose gaze turned people to stone. To find her, he needed information from the Graii, 3 ancient sisters who shared a single eye and a single tooth between them. They refused to talk. So Perseus, in a move of pure playground-level villainy, waited for them to pass the eye from one to another, snatched it out of the air, and held it for ransom. He refused to give it back until they gave him the directions he needed. He literally blackmailed 3 old women by stealing their only way of seeing. It's not exactly heroic, but it's an incredibly effective, if deeply disrespectful, way to get what you want. 22. The god Hermes was the divine messenger, but he was also the god of thieves, and he started his career early. On the very day he was born, he got bored, snuck out of his crib, and stole an entire herd of sacred cattle belonging to his older brother, Apollo. To cover his tracks, he fashioned tiny shoes for the cows and made them walk backward, creating a set of completely baffling footprints. When Apollo finally found him, the infant Hermes was back in his crib, pretending to be a helpless baby. He only got out of trouble by inventing the lyre on the spot and giving it to Apollo as a gift. He committed grand theft cattle on day 1 of his existence and got away with it by bribing his victim with a guitar. 23. Most people know Echo as that thing your voice does in caves. But in Greek mythology, Echo was a chatty mountain nymph who talked so much that even the gods got tired of her. Hera, queen of the gods and patience, cursed her so that she could only repeat the last words she heard. Then, Echo fell in love with Narcissus, the human mirror addict, and tried to talk to him. He asked, "Who's there?" And all she could say back was, "There." It was the world's first recorded conversation fail. Heartbroken and humiliated, she withered away until only her voice remained. The entire concept of echoes exists because one girl got cursed for talking too much and then ghosted by a man in love with a puddle. 24. There's a reason you've never heard of Salmoneus, the king of Elis. He had a god complex so massive that he wasn't content just being king. He wanted people to worship him as Zeus. To achieve this, he built a chariot and dragged dried hides and bronze kettles behind it to simulate the sound of thunder. He would then ride through his city, throwing lit torches at people to mimic lightning bolts. He was literally LARPing as the king of the gods, demanding sacrifices and annoying everyone with his terrible special effects. Zeus, the actual god of thunder, found this impersonation deeply unimpressive. He responded to the fake thunder with a real thunderbolt, erasing the king and his entire city from existence in a single, well-aimed blast. 25. The goddess Artemis was famous for 2 things: being a master of the hunt and having absolutely no chill. One day, a mortal hunter named Actaeon accidentally stumbled upon her while she was bathing in a forest spring. He didn't mean to, he just took a wrong turn. An awkward but understandable mistake. Artemis's reaction, however, was a masterclass in divine overreaction. Instead of just yelling at him or maybe turning him invisible for a bit, she transformed him into a stag. To make matters infinitely worse, his own pack of hunting dogs, no longer recognizing their master, immediately chased him down and tore him to pieces. It's a brutal lesson. In ancient Greece, accidentally walking in on someone could get you turned into a chew toy for your own pets. 26. The tale of Pygmalion is the original story of a man falling in love with an inanimate object. He was a sculptor so disgusted by the local women that he decided he could do better. So he carved a statue of his ideal woman out of ivory, and it was so lifelike and beautiful that he fell hopelessly in love with it. He would dress it up, give it gifts, talk to it, and even kiss its cold, ivory lips. It was profoundly weird. He prayed to Aphrodite, the goddess of love, who took pity on his strange, lonely situation. She brought the statue to life, turning his marble girlfriend into a real one. It's a heartwarming story, unless you think about the fact that it started with a guy who decided to just build his own girlfriend because he couldn't deal with real people. 27. When Zeus wanted to punish humanity for receiving the gift of fire, he came up with a truly insidious plan. He commissioned Hephaestus to create the first woman, Pandora. She was beautiful, charming, and equipped with a special jar, or box, depending on the story, that she was explicitly told never ever to open. This is like putting a giant red button in a room with a sign that says, "Do not push." What did she do? She opened it. Out flew all the evils of the world. Sickness, death, sorrow, and all their miserable friends. The only thing left inside when she finally slammed the lid shut was hope. So, according to the Greeks, the reason your life is difficult is because a god invented curiosity and then weaponized it against us all. 28. Bellerophon was a hero who became famous for riding the winged horse Pegasus. He defeated monsters and won battles, but success went straight to his head. He became so arrogant that he decided he was worthy of living on Mount Olympus with the gods. So he hopped on Pegasus and started flying up to their divine home, essentially trying to crash the most exclusive party in the universe. Zeus, watching this mortal ascend, was not amused by his audacity. He didn't even bother with a thunderbolt. He just sent a single tiny gadfly to sting Pegasus. The horse, startled, bucked Bellerophon off, and he plummeted all the way back to Earth, spending the rest of his life as a crippled, bitter outcast. He was defeated not by a god's wrath, but by a common bug. 29. One time, a man named Ixion murdered his father-in-law. Zeus, ever the forgiving sky dad, gave him a second chance by inviting him to Mount Olympus. So what did Ixion do? He immediately tried to seduce Hera. Smooth. Zeus, instead of frying him instantly, created a cloud shaped exactly like Hera, and let Ixion, well, do what he came to do. The result? Centaurs. Yes, the entire race of half-man, half-horse creatures was born from a cloud hookup. For punishment, Zeus tied Ixion to a flaming wheel spinning through the sky for eternity. A flaming, cosmic fidget spinner of shame. All because he couldn't keep it together at the first divine dinner party. 30. The inventor Daedalus, who built the labyrinth, was a genius. But he was also incredibly paranoid about his competition. His own nephew, Perdix, was showing signs of being an even greater inventor. At the age of 12, the kid invented the saw after observing a fish's spine. Daedalus, consumed by professional jealousy, couldn't handle the idea of being second best. So he did what any rational mentor would do. He took his nephew to the top of a high tower and pushed him off. Thankfully, Athena saw the boy falling and transformed him into a partridge before he hit the ground. Daedalus was a man who could build wings that touched the sun, but couldn't handle a 12-year-old being better than him at arts and crafts. 31. Let's talk about Ganymede, a Trojan prince who was, by all accounts, the most handsome mortal man alive. He was so ridiculously good-looking that Zeus himself decided he needed him on Mount Olympus. But Zeus didn't send a formal invitation or a golden chariot. In a move that was both majestic and utterly terrifying, he transformed himself into a giant eagle, swooped down from the heavens, snatched the bewildered prince up in his talons, and carried him off to be the official cupbearer for the gods. So Ganymede's career path went from future king to divine waiter, because his boss literally kidnapped him during a hostile avian takeover. 32. When the hero Jason arrived to claim his throne, the current king, Peleus, sent him on an impossible quest to fetch the Golden Fleece. He assumed Jason would never return. But Jason succeeded, thanks to the help of the sorceress Medea. When they came back, Peleus still refused to give up the throne. So Medea devised a brilliantly devious plan. She told Peleus's daughters she could make him young again. To demonstrate, she chopped up an old ram and boiled it in a pot with magic herbs, and a young lamb jumped out. The daughters, apparently missing the magic herbs part of the presentation, enthusiastically chopped up their own father and started boiling him, expecting a younger dad to emerge. All they got was a very grim family stew and a vacant throne, which was Medea's plan all along. 33. Cassandra, a princess of Troy, was cursed with the ability to see the future. This sounds like a great power, right? Wrong. The curse, given to her by the god Apollo after she rejected him, had a terrible catch. No one would ever believe her prophecies. So she spent years accurately predicting the Trojan War, the Trojan horse, and her own death, while her family and friends just patted her on the head and told her she was being hysterical. She was a walking, talking spoiler alert for the apocalypse that everyone ignored. It's the ultimate divine punishment, being the only sane person in a room full of people confidently making terrible decisions and being completely unable to stop them. 34. The god Dionysus, deity of wine and chaos, once got kidnapped by pirates who thought the rich-looking youth would fetch a high ransom. As they sailed away, Dionysus decided it was time for some divine entertainment. He made grapevines sprout from the ship's mast, turned the oars into slithering snakes, and filled the air with the sound of phantom flutes. The pirates, understandably terrified by this sudden acid trip at sea, lost their minds and jumped overboard. The moment they hit the water, Dionysus transformed them all into dolphins. So if you ever see a dolphin, just remember there's a slight chance it's the distant ancestor of a pirate who made a very, very poor career choice. 35. The story of King Sisyphus is about a man so clever he managed to cheat death. Twice. First, when Death himself, Thanatos, came to collect him, Sisyphus tricked him into his own chains, effectively putting a moratorium on anyone dying. The world fell into chaos. Ares, the god of war, was particularly annoyed because his battles were becoming pointless. After that was sorted, Sisyphus's second trick involved telling his wife not to perform funeral rites, then complaining to Persephone in the underworld that he needed to go back to punish his disrespectful wife. He was so good at finding loopholes that Zeus finally sentenced him to an eternity of pushing a boulder up a hill, only for it to roll back down. It wasn't a punishment for being evil. It was for being a cosmic-level nuisance who kept breaking the game. 36. King Minos of Crete had a pet problem. His wife Pasiphae had, let's say, romantic feelings for a divine bull, thanks to a curse. To act on this deeply cursed attraction, she commissioned Daedalus to build a life-sized hollow cow she could climb into. The plan worked. Months later, she gave birth to the Minotaur, a half-man, half-bull hybrid, which Minos then tossed into a giant maze. So basically, a cursed royal affair, a cow cosplay, and a labyrinth were all part of a plan to sweep the whole thing under the mythological rug. Ancient Crete had more red flags than a Spartan war parade. 37. The centaurs were a race of half-man, half-horse creatures, mostly known for being rowdy, violent drunks. This was proven at the wedding of their human friend Pirithous. Everything was going fine until the centaurs had a little too much wine and decided it would be a great idea to try and carry off the bride and the other female guests. A massive, chaotic brawl erupted in the middle of the wedding reception, with heroes fighting half-horsemen, using furniture and candelabras as weapons. It was the worst wedding brawl in history, all because the groom's horse friends couldn't handle their liquor and had zero concept of appropriate wedding etiquette. 38. The goddess Demeter had a daughter, Persephone, who was kidnapped by Hades and taken to be his queen in the underworld. Demeter, the goddess of the harvest, was so distraught that she caused a global winter, refusing to let anything grow until her daughter was returned. Zeus finally had to step in and broker a deal. The fine print was that Persephone could leave, as long as she hadn't eaten any food from the underworld. Just as she was about to be freed, Hades, a master of malicious compliance, offered her a few pomegranate seeds. She ate them, and that was it. The contract was binding. Because of this poorly timed snack, she was forced to spend part of every year in the underworld, which is why we have winter. Your seasonal depression is literally the result of a divine contractual loophole. 39. Tantalus was a king who was lucky enough to be friends with the gods. He was invited to their dinner parties on Mount Olympus. But he got arrogant and decided to test their omniscience with the most horrifying party trick imaginable. He invited them over, killed his own son, and served him to them in a stew. The gods, being all-knowing, were instantly disgusted. His punishment for this ultimate culinary crime was to be placed in a pool of water he could never drink from, under a fruit tree he could never reach. He was sentenced to an eternity of being tantalizingly close to relief, the perfect punishment for a man who served a meal no one ever wanted to be close to. 40. There's a story about the god Hermes and his son Pan, the goat-legged god of the wild. They were being pursued by the monstrous Typhon. To escape, all the gods disguised themselves as animals. Pan, in a moment of sheer panic, tried to turn himself into a fish but only managed to get it half right. He jumped into the Nile River with the head and torso of a goat and the tail of a fish. This bizarre, half-finished transformation was so ridiculous that Zeus found it amusing and decided to commemorate the moment by placing this hybrid creature in the stars as the constellation Capricorn. So, one of the signs of the zodiac is literally a tribute to a panicked god failing to transform properly. 41. The myth of Orion, the giant hunter, has one of the most bizarre endings in Greek lore. In one version, he became such a skilled hunter that he boasted he would kill every single animal on Earth. Gaia, the personification of the Earth itself, was not pleased with this plan. She decided to send a creature to stop him. Did she send a dragon? A titan? A monster from the depths? No, she sent a scorpion. A regular-sized but deadly scorpion. The giant mighty Orion, the great hunter who could challenge beasts and gods, was defeated by a creature he probably couldn't even see properly from his height. It's the ultimate proof that it doesn't matter how big you are. It's the tiny, unexpected problems that will get you in the end. 42. When Prometheus created humanity, he made them out of clay, but they were lifeless and dull. He wanted to give them something more, a spark to set them apart. Athena, who had a soft spot for the project, helped him sneak up to the heavens. While there, Prometheus didn't just steal fire. According to some stories, he also stole some of the divine breath, or intelligence from Athena's own workshop. He was essentially a cosmic intern who, while the boss was away, stole some of the company's most valuable intellectual property to improve his personal project. It explains why humanity is both brilliant and constantly getting into trouble. We're running on stolen, high-end software that we don't fully understand. 43. The story of the nymph Clytie is a tale of obsessive, unrequited love. She was a water nymph who fell desperately in love with Helios, the god of the sun, who drove his fiery chariot across the sky every day. Helios, however, was in love with someone else and completely ignored her. Devastated, Clytie did what any rational person would do. She sat down in a field and did nothing but stare at him as he moved across the sky for 9 straight days without food or water. The other gods, watching this unfold, eventually took pity on her and transformed her into a flower. But even as a flower, she never stopped watching him. We call that flower the sunflower, It's a beautiful plant with a surprisingly stalkerish origin story. 44. The Amazons, the legendary warrior women, had a very practical approach to combat. According to some ancient writers, to make themselves more effective archers, they would remove one of their own breasts. The idea was that it would get in the way of the bowstring, hindering their ability to fire arrows with maximum accuracy and power. While modern historians debate this heavily, the story itself is a symbol of their absolute hardcore dedication. They were so committed to being the best fighters that they were willing to perform self-surgery for a slight tactical advantage. It's a level of dedication that is both terrifying and, frankly, makes you question their entire strategy. So there it is. 44 stories proving that ancient divinity was a mess of bad impulses and cosmic accidents. From starting wars over fruit to getting outsmarted by mortals, these tales show a different side of the classics. But this brings up the ultimate question. Who was the greater threat to humanity's survival? Was it the gods, with their petty feuds and catastrophic powers? Or the mortals, whose own hubris, greed, and spectacular stupidity constantly invited divine disaster? Let the debate begin in the comments. And if you enjoy history with all its insane details left in, prove it by hitting like and subscribing for more.